I know is not going to be around tonight. So let's begin. We're ready to open the public meeting. Thank you very much. I know we're late. John Kiernan speaking. As a matter of formality, we open the meeting, and by a greeting, this is the October 10th, 2023 meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. The commission members are appointed by the Select Board to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town Bylaw governing the wetland resources. Two issues for the public's benefit. One is a matter of formality. We introduce ourselves. Secondly, we invite all to speak and ask questions, make comments, but we do ask that you identify yourself when doing so. Again, my name is John Kiernan. Hans, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hans Van Lingen, commission member.
Tom Palmer. Tom, you're on mute. Still on mute, Tom. Still. When do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, good evening. I'm Wendy Garpo, one of the commissioners.
All right, great. And Tom
Palmer, member.
All right. Is there anybody else on that I don't see from the commission? All right, well, we have 4 members. That's a quorum. So we will be ready to proceed. I think we don't have any continuances. Because actually I saw Joe, did I see Joe Federico here today? If anybody's waiting for 12:59, I thought that 12:59 Brush Hill was going to be continued again, but I thought I saw somebody in the list that was going to speak to that. Perhaps not. So if members of the public are waiting for that, I believe that that's going to be continued again, and that would be number 7 on the list, 1259 Brush Hill Road, Lot C, and number 8 on the list, 1259 Brush Hill Road, Lot D. And let me see if this is Milton Cable. Is this Milton Cablevision? Tom, we got it. We were saved. Shane got the message out, so we're all set. Thank you very much, Tom. All right, sorry, bye. That was Tom Pillar from Milton Cablevision, and he also was responding to our plea for help. So we're ready to go. First on the list is request for certificate of compliance, 100 School Street. And I'm not sure who's speaking to that, but would you identify yourself? And you're up and running.
Dean Lynch, I'm the owner of 100 School Street.
I'm sorry, can you say it again? I don't see a picture.
Dean, D-E-A-N, Lynch, L-Y-N-C-H.
Perfect. Thanks, Dean Lynch. You're on. Tell us what's going
on. I'm Brad Holmes with ECR assisting Dean Lynch on his request for certificate of compliance. We filed for 100 School Street. This is an order of conditions that has been somewhat overlooked. This goes back to 1986. So this is probably one you don't see very often. This is order of conditions for work at Mr. Lynch's property at 100 Dean Street. This predates the rivers protection regulations, so it was within the buffer zone to Pine Tree Brook. Their order of conditions at that time in 1986 was fairly simple, as in the sense that it only had a few special conditions. It didn't require an as-built plan, but we have prepared an as-built plan to show that we're in compliance with the order. That was been submitted to the Conservation Office. I can pull up the plan if you like and some site photographs.
If you would, Brad, that would be very helpful to us.
Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Can you still do that for us?
It's not allowing me to.
I know you can't.
Okay, sure.
But I thought the folks from Milton Cablevision was still here. Who opened us up. Good Lord. I think we lost him as well. We did. Anybody left from Sean McDonough or Tom Pillar? I just hung up on. Let me see if I can get him back.
All right, I'm taking off. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad, thanks. Thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. This is the Mr. Lynch's property at 100 School Street. This is the front yard. We'll just go through the pictures briefly. This is from the outer buffer zone, looking at the house. Looking at the rear of the house. Standing from the edge of the yard, looking towards Pine Tree Brook. And you can see Pine Tree Brook here, which is to the west of the site. As I said, the order of conditions was from 1986, which you don't see every day. There was not a requirement for an as-built plan, but there were 3 special conditions: that the toe of the slope of the foundation not be more than 15 feet away from the nearest edge of foundation, and top of said slope not to be above 36-foot contour. With the exception of the slope bank around the foundation, there should be no filling or alteration between the toe of said slope bank and Pine Tree Brook. And the applicant shall include in a deed to premises specific reference to this order of condition. So we're here to clean up and close out this order of conditions so that Mr. Lynch can sell the property. We did perform an as-built plan. Here's the 36-foot contour that was referenced. And as you could see in the photographs, the yard is modest around the property. It wasn't expanded further towards Pine Tree Brook, which times happens with creep since order conditions from 1986. As I said, this is prior to the Rivers Protection Act. The buffer to the river would have been the resource area. We're not in a flood zone. So with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. We're seeking to get a certificate of compliance to close out this old order.
Right. And Brad, have you submitted an attestation that this is in substantial compliance with the original order of conditions?
Yes, we put a cover letter to the certificate of compliance stating that it was in compliance.
Right. Questions from commissioners?
I have one. Could I share my screen?
I think so.
Let me give it a try.
If I need to do something, tell me. Or tell Hans, he might be able to help you better than I.
There's a picture I want to show. I'm hitting the share screen. All right, maybe this is it.
Yes, you started your screen sharing.
Yeah, that's, I think, looking at the lot from Google Earth or Google Maps. And Brad, I think you just said that the order said no alteration beyond a certain point. It looks to me like that bank is being landscaped in the inner riverfront area. It's just look at the one bank and then look at the bank on the other side. Looks like people have been working in there. I don't know the date of this photo, but it's true there was no Rivers Act when the order was issued, but it seems like the order didn't include permission to tidy up the riverbank. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's compliance with the order if the order said no alteration beyond a point, and yet it looks like alteration is ongoing.
I can read to you again what the special conditions were, but I was on site when I said landscape the area. You can, even in this photo, and you can go back to the photos that I submitted in the notice of intent, you can clearly see the limit of the lawn. Obviously, I wasn't at this property throughout the years to what the area within the buffer zone and riverfront area have not been landscaped. I don't. It's a dense canopy overhead. There's a lot of Norway maple in there.
Do you see the difference between the bank on the left and the bank on the
I
right?
do, but I don't see that there's been any recent alteration. I see what you're saying, but if you're on site, you can see that there isn't any area that you would notice anything with cut vegetation or any recent impact. I don't know what the history of the area was before, but I wouldn't go from the left side of the picture to the right side of the picture and make a determination that there's been an alteration.
Well, it's pretty obvious to me. I mean, just as an observer of plants in general. And the
Okay,
current
right.
owners have been there for like 30 years or something, right? So, yeah, I think if you don't do something, stuff you get an herb layer, which is true on the left and not on the right. So I would guess that there's been mowing there. And that's alteration that it doesn't seem like the order allowed for. How could we repair this situation? Could we add a condition saying that the inner riverfront area shall be allowed to return to natural condition? So, I don't know. I think that the new owner will come and say, well, look, this has all been tidied up and that's what I'll do too. Isn't that what's likely to happen?
I think, Tom, there may be a way to do this, but if we issue the certificate of compliance on the basis of the three conditions that Brad just read, that would allow the compliance to be filed and go forward. We would then lose our jurisdiction other than under the current Rivers Protection Act. We could issue not an enforcement order, but make a statement that we expect compliance, and this would not be recorded in the Registry of Deeds. Well, the certificate of compliance would be, and the original order of conditions already is, but we could just suggest in writing that the Rivers Protection Act now does govern the land, and it is the inner riparian zone, and there shall be no alteration. And if there
Without
were,
order.
what's that?
Yeah. Well,
But it's
we
not
could
an order.
permit it,
It's not an
maybe.
order, because
Yeah.
if we issue the certificate of compliance, we don't have any jurisdiction other than the general jurisdiction to monitor the banks, the inner riparian zones.
oh, who would this communication you're talking about go to?
Well, this is being sold, Brad. Is that correct? Oh, Mr. Lynch?
Yes.
No, we could simply write a letter introducing ourselves and welcome to Milton. And it is our view that the inner riparian zone should be left alone.
Is it under agreement now?
I don't have that answer. I mean, we're held to the rivers protection regulations
Right.
as any and standards of the buffer zone. As I said, this order is from 1986 and pertains to the construction of the house. And you know, there wasn't, as we said, there wasn't a Rivers Protection Act at that time.
But
You could see
you quoted a condition that said no alteration beyond a certain point.
Correct. And I
think
don't want to go off
obvious
track, but
an alteration.
I think it was pertaining to the house construction. You can see that the house construction and yard were maintained. It's almost 100 feet away from the river. I think that pertained to the construction of the house. I can't say that there's been an alteration here. I don't know the history but what I was trying to say is any property and working now, there's a Rivers Protection Act, obviously. Any property owner is going to be held to the regulations. So of course, we wouldn't have a issue if there's a letter that states, hey, welcome to Milton. You have a riverfront and buffer zone. Any work that you do any work that requires a permit, you need to come to the Conservation Commission.
I'd agree that would be an okay solution. The problem is we don't know who we should send the letter to. It just seems like I'm a little worried it will be lost in the, I would really like personally is if whoever is showing this property would say to every prospective buyer, oh, by the way, you're not going to be able to mow down here.
Yeah, that was a suggestion that we actually discussed about a year ago in terms of just plain old fashioned public education about what the Conservation Commission does and how do we as a town best protect our resources. And actually somebody made the suggestion that every new homeowner should have a sort of a welcome basket, including a letter from the Conservation Commission saying you have wonderful resources on your property and we'd like to help you preserve them. And we ask for assistance as well.
I guess what I'm concerned about is house will be sold. The new owner will get this news and say, well, nobody told me. You know, I see that coming.
Well, yeah, that may be true, but I mean, every citizen is obligated to be aware of the law. Is it true that a lot of them are not? Yes, that's true. But
Is the owner on the meeting tonight?
I thought Mr. Lynch
I'm
was.
here.
Oh,
Yes,
good.
he's on.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, so
What do you
let
think
me give you a
about
little bit
this?
of history of it. Let me give you a little history on the property itself, okay?
Sure.
The original owner, the builder of the house, was a widow of one of the firemen that lost his life at the Vendome fire. And she bought this property, built a house. The town of Milton never charged her any real estate taxes throughout the 18 years that she lived here. He did all of the work outside, the trench in the back for the cistern, the Roman cistern, so that the water remains out back and not in the cellar. And she did any plantings that are out there. And I've maintained that since I bought it 18 years ago with no changes. All I did do with at the wooded area is I did take down some deadwood trees so they wouldn't fall in the house. I hired a company to do that. And I burned firewood and I get a permit and stack some branches down there and have a fire in April generally with my neighbor. And everything else has remained absolutely the same as when she had it.
So I'll be honest with you, I don't see a reason to penalize this property owner because I mean, in my opinion, this is maintained, even though it's not in a completely natural condition, it's not a formal landscape. It hasn't been significantly altered. It still is maintaining. I mean, there's microtopography in there. It is missing some understory, but I mean, that's not, I would say that's probably in line of the intent of the original notice of intent application. And what I would guess they were trying to avoid is to extend a formal landscape all the way out to the riverfront, which hasn't happened here. It seems to be well maintained, the spacing between the trees. And I don't see a negative to the condition of this property, in my opinion.
Are you up on the Rivers Act, Hans?
The order of conditions.
The Rivers Act.
So that's not part of this conversation, Tom.
Well, it does apply to Pine Tree Brook, which is what we're looking at.
Or any future proposed, if there's any proposed activity, yes.
Correct.
But that's
Isn't
not
that
what
the
they're
easy way
seeking.
out? Isn't that the path of least resistance, Hans? You are correct. I mean, the order of conditions was pre-Rivers Act, and it seems to be in compliance. And we've got Brad's attestation to that effect. Now we're looking at the Rivers Act is applicable. Then it was not. So right now, there can't be any alteration within the inner riparian zone. But all we have to do is give the new owner notice of that.
Yeah, I think that would be fine if we find a way to do that. I just don't know what the routine is for making that happen.
Well, routine or not, I think in this case, we can do it. And you know, I'd ask Mr. Lynch that if the new owners, you know, if you can reach them, just tell them that they're going to get a letter from us and saying we'd like you to stay in compliance with the Rivers Protection Act, and that is not to alter the anything within the 100-foot jurisdictional line from the river. That's the inner riparian zone.
Yeah, and it makes sense to say why that rule exists as well, right? I think we all understand why it exists. That if you leave a riverbank in a natural condition, it helps filter runoff, helps protect the ground, helps keep sediment from going into the stream. Those banks look a little bare, like you could get runoff through there. That's the reason. It's just to help protect the resource for everybody. Doesn't mean it's not still the private property. It just means that it has more rules about it.
Would you be willing to write
Could
that
I
letter?
make
Tom?
Could I make a comment?
You sure can.
Hi, I am the abutter to the north to this property, and I just have 2 points. One is that I've been here 15 years, I think. Hi, my name's Ruth Culleton, sorry about that. And I have never seen the present property owner mow or dig or pull any understory from that, what we're looking at in this image. My other comment is that I've been making a great effort to work on the inner riparian zone of my property to eliminate invasive plants and let whatever will come up. I would like to comment that the property across the brook, which has been neglected and abandoned for some time, is basically a forest of euonymus. And I'm not sure that's the kind of understory we would like to have happen. It's a horribly invasive plant. It eliminates everything else from growing almost completely. And there are other invasives over there, but that's the one that we see in this image, to the left there. So if and Norway maples are another issue, I won't go into that, but if you were going to direct anything in a letter, I would encourage, if you want understory in this space to help erosion, I would encourage in that letter to maybe not change anything, but encourage the new owners to plant native plants with deep root systems or whatever you would like to make the inner riparian a healthier place.
Thank you. I agree that you can see a lot of euonymus on that other bank. On the other hand, just because it's invasive doesn't mean it doesn't do the things that plants do. So it's not ideal, but yeah, I thank you for that comment. It's right on the money, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Are there abutters and I can't see everybody's hands. So if somebody can see a hand raised, please tell me. Are there abutters or members of the public that would like to make a comment or suggestion? I don't hear anything and I can't see anything in the hand raised section. So I'll entertain a motion to issue the certificate of compliance based upon the attestation by Brad Holmes that the building was done back in the mid-1980s in substantial compliance with the order of conditions, and then simultaneously to have a letter drafted by Tom and with the to share among the commissioners to welcome the new owners and to remind them of their obligations and that of every citizen to protect the inner riparian zone. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
All right, thanks, Tom. Is there a second?
I second.
Thanks, Wendy. Any discussion among commissioners? Hearing none, I'll have to do a voice vote. Hans, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Tom, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Arthur, how do you vote?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
And I, John Kiernan, vote yes as well. Thanks. That's unanimous, Mr. Lynch and Brad Holmes. Thank you very much. And Ruth, thank you very much for your comments. They were They are right on the money.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thanks so
All right,
much.
next on the agenda is 147 Gun Hill Street. I do not know who the presenter is for that.
It's me, David Lazaro.
Oh, great, David. Welcome, and tell us about the project.
It's a deck project that extending the existing deck 2 feet closer to the stream in the back and making it 6 feet wider along the house.
And how far are you from the stream in the back?
I believe it was 56 feet. The 100-foot buffer goes right through the existing house.
All right, what I'm
I'm gonna pull it
must
up
have
here.
misplaced it. I was looking for the plan. I've got your request for determination of applicability in my hand. We're just very careful about our. In fact, we just approved one at a site walk a couple of weeks ago on Hurlcroft. We just are very careful about the 25-foot non-disturbance zone. But it was the same kind of project, extending the deck another 2 feet or another.
Yeah.
I think it was like 3.5 feet towards the.
Yeah, it's 50 feet.
It's what?
It's 56 feet to the wetlands.
To what? Is it top of bank?
I'm just looking at the plot plan here. I don't know how to share that on my phone here. Let me see if I can do that. I'm sorry.
I don't have the plot plan. Does anybody have it in the
I
handout?
sent it to conservation committee, the conservation office.
All right, do any commissioners have it? I do not.
It was not in my package, John.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we set it up for a site walk? Just as we did on Hurlcroft Street. And by that time, for your benefit, we do that on Saturday mornings. We usually start at depending 8 or 8:30, and we just show up at 147 Gun Hill, and if you'd invite us on, we take a look at it. Because what I'm concerned is that we make sure that we're all using the same measuring point of reference. Is this a top of bank, or is it from the a resource area like a vegetated wetland?
It's hard to determine from the plot plan.
Well,
believe-
technically there should be an engineering plan that shows that, but we try to be as as cooperative as possible. So at the site walk, if it's obvious to us, and if not, Tom, maybe you could take your auger with you if that's going to be an issue. We can usually pretty well gauge where it is, and then we have a tape measure. So make sure you're out of the 25-foot non-disturbance zone.
They have an existing wood fence that's at the 50-foot buffer line. And then it says 56 feet to, I believe it's top of bank, because the edge of delineate, I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong. The wetland markers is shown further away.
What wetland markers? Do you know if it was flagged, or are you talking about something?
It was flagged. I had the whole property flagged and then plot plan done.
Oh, perfect. Well, that's what we need, but we just don't see it in the package.
I'm sorry. I sent it to conservation last week. I had it all done.
Well, from what you say, it sounds like an easy fix. But why don't we set this up? Let me go around and see who's available. Let's take a look at the next couple of Saturdays.
Okay.
I should know this, but what's the date next Saturday?
14th.
At the 14th.
That's this Saturday is the 14th. Yep.
Right. And then the 21st, and then the 28th. So how about the 14th? Hans?
So Saturday mornings are now very difficult for me in general for quite a while.
Well, for quite a while. How about, do you want to make it on a Sunday?
I can do on a Sunday, yes. But if you
Okay.
can get a quorum on a Saturday, if that's easier, then
All right, well, let's go around. Arthur, are you okay on the 14th, Saturday?
Right now it looks I'm okay on the 14th or the 15th.
Okay, Wendy, 14th? I don't see you, Wendy. You may be on mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
Yes, the 14th does work for me. Thank you.
all right. That's perfect. And what about Tom? You okay on the 14th?
Yeah, I can do that. Dave.
Okay, so we've got our quorum. So Hans, you can sit this one out. And I'll check with Ingrid and Todd as well. But why don't we plan to be at 147 at 8:30 on Saturday morning?
Okay.
Is that good? All right. It won't take long, but by that time, Philip, I don't think is on tonight. But
I
see if
he joined.
you did join.
I'm
Oh,
here,
good.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
God, I'm here.
Oh, perfect. All right. So Philip, do you have those plans?
I'll look tomorrow in my office and send them out tomorrow.
Ah, perfect. That's
I should
great.
have.
All right, that's good.
Sorry,
So-
I didn't send them out to you before.
I'm sorry, say again.
I said, sorry, you didn't get them from your packet. I thought they were there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, again, it's easy fix. All right, we'll see you Saturday morning, the 14th at 8:30, 147 Gun Hill.
All right,
Thank you
great.
very
Thank
much. All right, next on the agenda is notice of intent 31 Holland Street. Do we have a presenter?
Yes, we do. I am here to present for 31 Harlan Street. Let's see. As I pull up my screen here, my name is Chris Frateroli. I'm a wetland scientist with Goddard Consulting. We prepared the notice of intent submittal for this project here.
All right, perfect.
So I've got just a couple of images here to share with you folks. First up, aerial photo of the site. Obviously, you can see existing house and pool area at the front of the lot. It's kind of a long, skinny lot. And this is just a lawn area back here. You got your driveway and a bit of patio area out here. And then we can move down to the site plan, which I believe you folks should all have. This shows along here, we have a small isolated vegetated wetland on the neighbor's property that we did flag, as well as a corner, so to speak, of a bordering vegetated wetland across Harlan Street here that does cast a 100-foot buffer onto the site. And then we can move down. This is that same aerial photo, just with those couple of lines overlaid. I find this to be a little easier to look at personally. So here we have that isolated vegetated wetland, that flagged wetland line here. Purple line is our 25-foot no disturb. The yellow lines are the 100-foot buffer zone. So you will see that essentially the entire house is within the 100-foot buffer zone, is within conservation jurisdiction. And similarly over here, we have this little corner of BVW on this side that also casts a buffer zone onto the site. And now moving down, this is a little markup of the site plan I put together. This is the existing house here, and back here we have a bit of a deck area. There's a little bit of a bump out of the house here as well. So what you see here in this little yellow-green polygon is the area to be demolished. And then as we move down, you'll see this is the addition, so to speak. It's mostly, interior work. but we do also end up with a slight expansion of the footprint of the house, which is this little green area here. So this little bump out of the house here as it's proposed will represent a slight expansion in the footprint of the house. The remainder of the deck that is not demolished for the addition will be essentially just replaced in kind in the same location, slightly smaller to allow for that extended rear side of the house. And I do want to note, this is a little photo of the back of the house here. I do want to note that all this work is within existing impervious area. So the expanded footprint of the house really only comes out a couple extra feet in this direction and a couple extra feet in this direction. So what we end up with, here's a little architect's rendering. You have this section of the house here, which is the addition. The deck remains mostly the same, a little smaller. This section of the house ends up being a little bit bigger, both towards the viewer and to the viewer's left here. So essentially what we're looking at is a small addition to the house. We're on the outskirts of the buffer zone, and we are not impacting that 25-foot no disturb. We are also providing erosion control barriers along the fence down here. The property is fenced on both sides. So what we did was we provided that just kind of along the base of the fence here, right along the property line. And I think that about does it for my spiel. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
When were the wetlands flagged?
I forget the exact date, but I believe it was about the beginning of September.
All right, and who did the flagging?
I did.
Okay. What is the net increase? I know I heard what you said about the currently existing impervious patio, but what's the net increase of impervious surface?
There is no increase in impervious surface. This is entirely over existing patio area. The expansion of the house, I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe it's less than 200 square feet.
All right. And what about roof drains? Where are they going?
I don't believe that roof drains are shown on the civil plan here, but they may be shown on the architectural plan. I believe we also have Rob Hannigan in here who did the civil plans. I don't know if Rob wants to unmute and speak to that possibly.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the roof drains are. The addition is in the existing impervious area, and I really can't conceive of the reason for the request of roof drains.
Well, I just want to know, if there's water there, is there any kind of a need for, some kind of a drainage system? And that's not a big expense item, and it's not tricky from an engineering point of view. It just sometimes makes sense to avoid erosion, to put in some kind of a, small Caltech chamber.
No, there's no need.
All right, we're going to take a look. All right. So I'm assuming that the plans are going to show exactly what the net increase is, whether it's 200 or plus or minus. We want to know what the net increase is in impervious surface. And we'll put this on for a site walk on Saturday.
Absolutely. I will pull that number for you. I don't have it off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Got it. Any questions from commissioners?
I would say that I did review the report, and it was very complete and well done, I thought. I had a question about the soils. Mr. Frateroli, did you agree that the soils were urban eudorthents, I think they were called? They were
So this area, as I understand it from some of my conversations and looking at the USGS map of the area, this was a former gravel pit or quarry of some sort. So the soils in the area are a little bit unnatural, as you would expect with an eudorthents soil unit like the NRCS has mapped in the area. They tend to be gravelly and sandy and not particularly loamy.
I gotcha. I was curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so it looks like any other commissioners? The butters, members of the public? And with the assent of the applicant, we'll continue this until Saturday, the 14th, and it's probably going to be about, I don't think the other one's going to take long, so it's probably going to be about 9, a little after 9 o'clock.
Sounds
At
good.
30.
I will be there, and I will double check with the homeowners just to make sure that that's all okay.
Oh, perfect, good. Thank you. If it's not, contact Philip Driscoll, okay?
Will do.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night.
Good night. Next on the agenda is 999 Randolph Avenue. Kelly, is that you?
It is me. Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Durfee Cardoza. I'm with Avalon Consulting Group, and I'm here tonight to represent Wollaston Golf Club. I have with me Jim Burke with DeSalle Burke Sala, and also Charles Grandin, who's the general manager at Wollaston. Prior to the hearing today, I sent over copies of the abutter certificates of mailing and the copy of the public notice that was published in the Patriot Ledger. And you'll note that there was also public notice made in the Environmental Monitor on September 25th. DEP received a copy of the filing, and we got a file number today. So as most of the commission members know, Wollaston has had a permit since about 1998 to treat the ponds on the property for aquatic nuisance vegetation. The last time we came before this commission, which was in 2022, we heard that you'd like the club to investigate some alternative non-pesticide based methods for managing the ponds. And this notice of intent gets filed as an ecological restoration project under both the Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Wetlands Bylaw, will supplement the ongoing management program. So what we have now is monitoring and pesticide application. And so what we're proposing is mechanical removal of vegetation using a hydro rake over a 3-year period. It will remove rooted vegetation and organic material from the pond, and should be just another tool, if you will, that will allow them to keep desirable water quality at the pond. Also, what we're proposing to do is take this vegetation when it comes out of the pond and transport it across the entrance driveway to an upland area and use it as compost, cut it with sand, and then reuse it on the golf course for future use by the golf course management team. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can share my screen.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, we'll give you a site plan here. Okay, so are you seeing the site plan?
Yes, we can see it, Kelly.
So for orientation, Randolph Avenue is about here. This is the driveway that comes into the golf course. Here it crosses, excuse me, over the bridge, and this is up the hill to the golf course. Russell Pond is here on the right-hand side of this plan. It's on the easterly side of the golf course. It's about 10 acres in size. It's fed from Route 28 in this area, and then the discharge is from a dam and culvert at this location through an intermittent stream here. The proposed hydro raking project has been designed to complement the ongoing management, and it should be able to remove the water lily population that's here without pesticides. Right now, we're doing that with amazimov, which was approved. The plan would be to work first in year 1 in this zone, year 2 in this zone, and year 3 in this zone. And we think that after that time period, there should be good multi-year control, at least 1 to 3 years of the water lily. So we won't have increased shading. We won't have a decrease in oxygen in the pond after this work happens. Let me just show you a picture of what a hydro rake looks like. This is a hydro rake. The work will be done by Solitude, who I don't remember how many of you were on the commission at the time, but the pond on the 6th hole was hydro raked. by Solitude at Wollaston many years ago, and it was very successful for a very long period of time. This is essentially a barge-mounted backhoe with rake attachments on the front. It has a paddle wheel, so it can work in shallow water, and the arm will allow it to reach to about 10 feet deep. And what we're proposing to do is take the material that looks something like this. It's organic biomass and roots, and hopefully the rhizomes of the water lily, and transport those into dump trailers that will be hauled by tractors. So let me go back to that site plan, and you're going to see on this plan right here that there are a series of orange pathways for these tractors to go. And we've designated 2 offload areas approximately at each of these locations. And so the hydro rake would be launched here. It would do its work around here. And then what we would have in these boxes is we would lay plywood down. There'd be erosion control around those areas and along this plywood path until we get outside the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. They'd go up onto the asphalt here, along this area, across a cart path here, and then up to this area, well outside your jurisdiction. But I thought it was useful for you to understand how this process is going to work. And we would do this for 3 years. This would be the first one, the second one, and the third one. And the estimate is that about 1 to 2 weeks, they would use either 1 hydro rake or 2 hydro rakes, depending on schedule and timing. And we expect there'd be about 400 cubic yards of vegetation removed when it's wet. And then after it goes up into this compost area and dries out, it's about 200 cubic yards of material. And as I said, it will be cut with sand at that location. So we're proposing 2 different kinds of erosion control to make sure that we don't damage the turf in these areas or have anything go back into the pond. In these areas, and erosion control typical, there are 12-inch mulch wattles that would be placed. And at this location here, which is the outfall for the pond, there would be a turbidity curtain. So the erosion control, the plywood, and the turbidity curtain would be laid down each time and then removed immediately after the work is completed. The goal would be to do the work in the winter when the ground is frozen, but the pond is not frozen, so that we do the least amount of damage to the turf. And we are able to get in and out. During that time, typically the pond discharge is fairly low. If we need to slow down the water that's leaving, we would do that with sandbags. We think that it will take, again, 1 to 2 weeks each event. Kind of the unusual thing here is that we're asking you for an order that would be up to 5 years. Because if we know it's going to take 3 years to do that, and if we get the order now and we start the work in February, so this would be February of 24, February of 25, February of 26. By the time we get to that point, our order won't be any good. And we know this ahead of time. So we'd like you to grant that for 5 years so that they have the time to do this. As required in the regulations, we did an alternatives analysis. It was based on the Massachusetts DCR documentation, a generic environmental impact report, and the lake and pond management documentation. And we think that this is a good supplement to what we have now. By using the Clearcast or Amazimov to treat the water lily in the year before the work is done, that will loosen the rhizomes, enable them to be pulled out more easily during the hydro raking process. And the guess is there'll be very little of this particular pesticide needed over time for, no one can really tell, it depends on how much comes out, but 1 to 3 years is a conservative estimate. One of the people that I spoke with said we might go as much as 5 to 10 years. So I think it's a beneficial approach. It's not an inexpensive approach, but it will certainly help the health of the pond over time.
So if you want a 5-year order, would you include within that, would it be acceptable to get reports on an annual basis as to progress being made and efficacy of this technique?
Absolutely. So what your order, what the order for aquatic nuisance vegetation management for this pond does now is it requires an annual report. So they're working on that, finishing out this year, and you'll get your first annual report sometime, I would presume, in the January timeframe. And we would just add this into that. So there would be an annual report ongoing. So I think you'd be able to see the difference in management over time, even after this hydro raking piece is done, because you're going to get those annual reports.
Okay. I have experience with the golf club in hydro raking in one of the other smaller ponds some years ago. But I know one of the concerns that was expressed at that time is the equipment being utilized. Can you kind of walk us through how the design of the hydro raking machine will protect the water resource? And I'm particularly concerned with hydraulic lines, the operation of the shovel.
Sure. So the hydraulic fluid that's used is biodegradable. It's not a petroleum base because it's meant to operate primarily in the water. It moves very slowly. So if there are fish and other aquatic life, they'll kind of get out of the way during this process. So we don't anticipate there'll be injuries in that way. The equipment is launched on a flatbed trailer that would allow it to be brought right up to the edge of the water. They put plywood, they have plywood and plastic mats, and they would use them alternatively, and they put it right down to make sure that there's no damage to the bank as the equipment is being launched in. It's about a 15-minute process, and then those plastic mats would be picked up. Then the hydro rake stays in the water. Fueling is done very carefully. There's only one company right now that has these hydro rakes, and it's Solitude. They've done this work for many, many years. They're the ones who did it at Wollaston before. They're a national company now, but they're based out of Shrewsbury. And this is what they do every single day.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Commission members, questions?
I'd just like to remark that I prefer this approach to herbicides, and I'm glad it's being explored.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Wendy?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Arthur.
I would just add that our conservation agent, Steve Ivers, and I walked about a third of the perimeter of Russell Pond. And excuse me for this. Within the last week, last Saturday, following last Saturday's conservation site walk. And I'm in agreement with Tom's comment that this would be a preferred application. There's no question about the need for the removal of the vegetation. It was very visible from the edge of the bank. And my sense is that that was the opinion of our conservation agent as well.
Well, thanks, Arthur. Ingrid is not here, and I would never think to speak for her, but I know she's very interested in the use of chemicals and very sensitive to that. So I'm guessing that any reduction in the use of chemicals is a good thing on her mind. Wendy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you, Kelly, for listening to our request when you were before us a year ago, and for proposing this mechanical alternative. I'm very excited about it.
All right, are there any special, this is a notice of intent. Are there any special conditions that people have concern with? I think, Kelly, you walked us through the pathways to the edge, and taking it out of our jurisdiction, that is taking the spoils out of our jurisdiction for disposition there. Are there any other special conditions that anybody has in mind? Hans, anything in your that you
No,
would
I think
feel
that
as a
the
concern?
standard conditions you put forward about refueling or anything else, anything done outside or maintenance being done outside the buffer zone is appropriate.
Okay, and Kelly, you're aware that those are our usual customary boilerplate, if you will, conditions, that no storage overnight of equipment and no refueling within our jurisdiction.
So your wish would then be that the hydro rake is removed from the pond and taken outside your jurisdiction for fueling?
For fueling, yes.
Okay. I mean, it's a process to get it out over the bank, but if that's your wish, then that's what we'll do. They typically would fuel it in place.
Any thoughts on that? That would be against our usual, as I said, boilerplate condition.
The only question I have, Mr. Chairman, on that is, I think Kelly said that the fuel supply is different from the traditional fuel supply. Is that right?
The hydraulics,
that's
the hydraulic fuel is biodegradable. On
Okay.
equipment like this, that tends to be what leaks. A hydraulic line goes.
All right.
So
I understand now. I'm with you.
So my suggestion would be, well, so regardless of whether the hydraulic fluid is biodegradable or not, a release of hydraulic fluid is still a release. Let's be clear about that. Secondly, if it's infeasible to refuel outside the buffer zone, then I think at a minimum we should require having a spill kit on site and some sort of secondary control, or I've seen other construction sites or during activities where any fuel is stored in a tub or some kind of containment to make sure that it just that any transfer of fuels is controlled and that there's protection for any inadvertent spillage.
So we typically use a kid's pool. I know it seems a little odd, but it works great as a containment location for storage.
That's a funny industry practice. So that's not the first time I've heard that.
But yes,
But
a spill kit and those provisions would be acceptable.
But Hans, are you talking about pulling it out of the pond for refueling and putting it on the bank?
Ideally it would be on the bank, but if that's infeasible because of just logistics, then we would need whatever protections in place in order to ensure that any fuel that's transferred goes from the place where it is to where it's supposed to be, and that in between those two places it doesn't end up where it's not supposed to be.
Well, Kelly, would it be, I mean, in my mind, if there's a spill of anything, it would be better off on land than rather in the pond. Is it feasible to take it out of the pond to refuel, even if you don't take it out of our jurisdiction?
Yes. I mean, if that's what needs to be done, then that's what will be done.
That would certainly be my preference, along with the safety precautions of a spill kit, and I've used in the cases that I've had the kiddie pools. That's very common practice, and it actually works. That would certainly be my preference, but I want to make sure that it's doable. Any thoughts, Wendy, Arthur, Tom?
That would be my preference as well.
Okay.
I think because of this, the magnitude of this project, that would be advisable
Good. All right.
in its duration.
Then we can add that as a special condition.
I'm also assuming, Kelly, that any of the transporting trucks, that might be stored on site, would be stored up in the yard and out of the jurisdiction.
They will be. They're tractors that are owned by the club, or rented for this purpose, and a dump trailer. So they would be stored outside your jurisdiction at maintenance, and refueled outside your jurisdiction at maintenance.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like we've got the makings of a motion with those conditions. Are there any other comments from commissioners? Are there any abutters or members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment? I don't see any hands raised, but I can't see, because we're sharing the screen, I can't see other people. Does anybody see a hand
Let
raised?
me stop sharing. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, that would be helpful. Okay, so I still don't see any hands raised. All right, so is there a motion to approve an order of conditions with the special conditions that we have discussed?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Arthur. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Hans. Any discussion among the commission members? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll take a voice vote. And Hans, how do you vote?
Yes.
Arthur, how do you vote?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Tom? You might be on mute, Tom.
Yes.
All right, good, thank you. And I vote yes as well, John Kiernan. I think I got everybody. All right, fair enough. You've got your order of conditions with those special conditions, and Philip, I'll work with you tomorrow on trying to make sure that we get these conditions down on paper.
Perfect.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you as always. Good job.
Thank you, and have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right, number 5 and number 6 next on our agenda. They'll go together. Notice of intent, 25 Guile Road, Lower Guile Field, continued hearing. And number 6, informational, 25 Guile Road, Grass for Guile, continued hearing. This is one in which it's been on our agenda for a number of months now, and we finally get our contract signed with Tetra Tech. They did respond, as others were given the opportunity to respond, and they did respond to our request for a proposal with a scope of work, and we had actually 10 items of concern to the commission, and we did receive recently from Sean Reardon. I see you there, and I don't know, I can't see Ron Myrick, but I think he's there as well. And I did distribute that to as many people as I could think of. I tried Paul, and I think he finally received it. I had a couple of bounce backs. Deborah Milbauer, I tried to get it out to you. I tried to get it out to as many people that I knew were stakeholders or interested parties. But in any event, Sean, you or Ron, could you kind of walk us through what you did and what the scope of work was and what your response was?
Sure. So just for introductions, I'm Sean Reardon, Vice President with Tetra Tech, focusing mostly on civil infrastructure and hydrology. Ron Myrick is also here with me. He's also a Vice President at Tetra Tech. He's our PFAS guy, and he's an LSP in Massachusetts, as well as a professional engineer. So the two of us have pretty much all the areas covered. I think most of the questions fall in Ron's sort of skill set, but I'll do a quick little summary of what we provided to the board. As you mentioned, Chairman, we were asked 10 questions. Those questions sort of consolidated into about 4 basic areas. One being does the field system represent a risk of PFAS contamination? 2 is, will the turf system and sort of the elevated temperatures you see on artificial turf systems, will that manifest itself as an elevated temperature in Pine Tree Brook? 3rd one was, are there some disposal, or what are the disposal options for this turf system when it eventually reaches the end of its usable life? And then, are there any sort of PFAS limits that are recognized that you should be aware of, and how do they relate to this project? So we issued a letter on the 4th that addressed each of the 10 questions we were asked. I don't think they were a reach for either Ron or I. I think we're both pretty confident in our responses. But I'll just real quickly just go through what we found as it relates to the 4 basic questions. 1, is there a risk of PFAS? Our experience is that there's very little, if any, PFAS in these turf systems. And if there is PFAS found, it's usually at below detection limits or near below detection limits. And it's usually attributable to more environmental conditions that just find their way into the manufacturing products, because PFAS is sort of ubiquitous in the environment. It's in the air, it's in the ground, so it's all around us. So to see it in products at trace amounts is not it's not unexpected. As far as temperature impacts to Pine Tree Brook, fortunately, relatively speaking, we're several hundred feet from Pine Tree Brook, so any sort of periodic increase in temperature at the turf surface, we wouldn't expect that temperature change to manifest itself at Pine Tree Brook, principally because it's so far away. It has to go through pipes and underground drainage systems. Temperatures on the turf surface usually, are worse when it's bright and sunny out. So you're usually not expecting too much rainfall then. If it does rain, usually the turf system cools down pretty quickly. So we wouldn't expect any temperature impacts at Pine Tree Brook from the turf system. Disposal options, unfortunately, pretty much it's solid waste right now. There are some sort of outfits that take like high-end turf products that are not usable for high-end applications, like say, Gillette Stadium. They get rid of their turf a lot sooner than most municipalities do. So sometimes that gets repurposed in other applications. No real recycling options right now, but who knows, that could change. But it's all speculation at this point. I would suggest you consider it a solid waste. It's going to get put in a landfill somewhere.
And can I interrupt? I presume there's a cost for that if it goes to a licensed site disposal facility.
Well, I would just go to a landfill as solid waste, just like normal trash does.
Understood.
I mean, you're gonna definitely pay a transport fee or a disposal fee. I mean, certainly, I don't know what the town of Milton does for solid waste, but it's got to go somewhere, and someone's going to charge you for it.
All right, but it's not a hazardous waste disposal.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And then the last question was about sort of levels. DEP, Mass DEP does have reporting levels for PFAS in soil and in groundwater. So those are relative standards that you want to be aware of. And then the EPA is developing standards for or limits for PFAS in drinking water. So those are the 3 most applicable things. Probably the soil one's the most applicable, because the project did some sampling out there which found PFAS in the soil, but all those numbers, Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but all those were below reportable concentrations. So you don't have any actionable condition there.
We've heard some talk about changes coming, both at the EPA and DEP levels, in terms of what would be the maximum contaminant load. Are those numbers changing? And if so, can you predict the approximate values where they're going to be? I say approximate because I've asked you to predict. It hasn't arrived yet, but I believe that there is some public comment on suggested changes. So I just want to make sure that if your analysis is leading to a conclusion of X on October, is it going to change if we get to January?
I'll let Ron speak to that one.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what's happening right now is the federal government is looking at what Massachusetts engaged on about 4 or 5 years ago. They're looking at maximum contaminant level for drinking water. In Massachusetts, we have a limit of the sum of 6 particular PFAS compounds. There's thousands of PFAS compounds, but there's 6 they're concerned about. And that number is 20 parts per trillion. EPA is looking at it a little differently. They're looking at a few different compounds at about 4, 5, and some much higher than that. So depending on the ones you're looking at, you may be above 20 or below 20. For this project, it doesn't have relevance.
Yeah, it doesn't
have relevance. It won't change the analysis that we're doing or the overall impact on the project. If, relative to PFAS, well, one reason is because we don't see PFAS in this turf system. But with regard to, say, the soils having some residual PFAS related to atmospheric deposition or other things, the soils are regulated, and we don't see that number changing in Massachusetts anytime soon.
Can I take you back? Something you just said that the numbers, the current numbers are projected changed numbers. That's for drinking water as opposed to what, dermal exposure?
So right now it's a consumption issue. It's an ingestion issue. It's not a contaminant that you worry about touching. Okay, so what Massachusetts is looking at is consumption, and EPA is following their path, and they're also looking at consumption. And I think that we'll land somewhere between 10 and 20 parts per trillion in a few months for everybody in the country, somewhere in that range. But it'll get very complicated if I go through all the variations of how this could turn out. But we're not going to see a significant change, but it's going to go nationwide instead of just being Massachusetts.
All right.
For
Well,
drinking water.
Using that as your standard of reference, can you go back and give us 2 numbers? And it may be plural, not just a number, but we understand that there's a PFAS concentration in the soils currently on site. Is that true?
There is a concentration less than 1 part per billion is in the soil that are regulated PFAS, less than 1 part per billion. The standard by which you need to report that to Mass DEP and do something about that is above that number. And for some of the compounds, way above that number. For some of the compounds, not much more than that number. But how the standards were developed, without getting too far into this, was Mass DEP didn't have a real good way to do this. So Vermont did a survey of what they saw in all their soils all over Vermont. And they took the 90th percentile for some of these compounds and said, all right, let's just use this. What they want to do is see if there's a trigger that makes you need to go in and look for a PFAS issue. So that's how they came up with their most stringent sample. If you're in a commercial industrial area, that number is much higher. But if you're in a residential area, they want you at least to look at this issue as being a potential source related to firefighting foams or something like that.
All right, and in the Lower Guile Road field area, how do those numbers compare? The level of concern versus what was found in the soil?
Similar to background around Massachusetts and Vermont. There's since been a study in Massachusetts, and you'd see numbers like that anywhere in Massachusetts.
But Ron, they're well below the reporting concentrations for soil.
Correct. They're below the reporting concentration, but they're similar to what you would see in most people's backyards or anywhere around the state.
All right. Now, same set of questions, but go to the component parts of the turf system. What do they show? And when I say the system, I'm talking about the matting on top. I'm talking about the bedding beneath and the adhesives used to keep everything together.
I think the chart that was submitted by the proponent shows that pretty well. The detected concentrations were much lower than the soil, and in some cases not detected at all.
All right, and kind of a side issue, but in order to put the bedding underneath the mat, does the turf field system require that soil be removed?
Yes, yeah, so the topsoil on top of the current field would get taken out to expose the subsoil, then a granular material would be put on top. And then the turf system would be put on top of that.
Understood.
It doesn't mean that soil needs to leave the site, though. That soil could be reused somewhere else.
All right, so that's because it's below the reportable level, that's not considered currently contaminated soil, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. I know there are a number of concerns that have been expressed, and I actually went back over some of the written materials that was submitted. And I go back to one that came in from Neponset, and this might be a Chris Huntress question. But one of the original concerns is we're not exactly sure which product is being suggested or used. Chris, am I correct that product has actually been identified?
It has. We're suggesting and recommending a product made by Tenkati. It's Greenfield's turf. It's the product that the original tests were run on, so we know exactly what's in them. That's the carpet itself, the synthetic turf. The infill is a organic product made by Brock. And this was all in our original presentation to the Conservation Commission. And then underneath the turf would go a resilient shock pad for safety and for shock attenuation. And that's also made by Brock.
And is that the substance that's actually pine or some kind of wood?
That's the infill material that goes into the synthetic turf fibers on top, yes.
All right. And let me shift back to Sean or Ron. Have the chemical components, if that's the right word, of the wood been considered? What I'm asking really, is there a preservative in the wood component parts of this bedding or shock pad?
We looked at the website. We looked at the safety data sheet. They identify it as organic without additives. That's the best we can go by as the product literature. The analysis that was done on a different project did not find concerning contaminants in that product, in the Brock fill.
Understood. And now again, going back to the last couple of meetings, there have been some concerns expressed about well, two areas. One is that if the water coming off the field, when I say off, I know it's pervious, it's going to drain through into these rib drains that we've seen the design for. The water is going to be collected and then connected to an existing drainage system that basically dumps it right into Pine Tree Brook. So we had some concerns, and some of the neighbors and citizens have indicated, well, wait a minute, is the water too hot? And one of the suggestions that came up was, well, can we slow it down? Can we put it in some kind of a detention chamber and let it cool off? So that's one, and again, I'm accumulating a lot of concerns that were expressed into two areas. One was the temperature. The other one was, if there were to be any kind of increase in a contaminant load, is there any way to filter it out? And I know, I heard what you just said, that there is no increase in the contaminant load, or there's no contaminant load. I heard that. But if there were, is there a way to filter that out without having some kind of giant, water system, filtration system?
Well, I'll answer that. There's a little overlap in the two questions in terms of how you deal with them. So from a heat standpoint, again, we wouldn't expect there to be a noticeable change in temperature as a function of the turf system at Pine Tree Brook in any case. However, you have a natural buffer zone right there, which is the wetland between Pine Tree Brook and in the turf system. We would prefer to see, rather than sort of having the discharge from the turf system sort of take the express lane, which is just putting it into the drainage system, we'd suggest you discharge that trench, that channel drain from the turf system to the wetland just on the other side of the field, so that the wetland can do what it does perfectly, which is filter contaminants and allow any sort of changes in the water quality to get treated before it gets to Pine Tree Brook. So, it has to go through a long wetland before it gets to Pine Tree Brook. So by the time it ever got to Pine Tree Brook, anything would have been filtered out. It could provide, that wetland could provide the same function, the same sort of valuable buffer zone between any potential contaminant source and Pine Tree Brook. So routing any stormwater discharge through the wetland prior to getting to Pine Tree Brook is only going to help the quality of Pine Tree Brook. As far as other contaminants, Ron, you can speak to this, but I mean, you'd have to sort of know what the contaminants of concern are, because there's different treatment systems for all sorts of different contaminants. But I think the wetland is a universally, effective treatment system for anything.
Right, Ron, anything to add to that in terms of the filtering mechanism? Actually, it's the function of the wetland.
Well, I really don't. I think Sean covered it. I think to really dig into the details, we'd have to know what kind of contaminants we were concerned about. We haven't found any from what is being proposed to be a particular concern. So, but something that we could review if there were contaminants that were identified.
All right. Well, some people have raised the issue of, they think that there's going to be some kind of a micro shedding of plastic components, and that would include PFAS. So that's really what we're talking about. That's sort of the elephant in the room.
Again, John, we found there's really no PFAS in the system. So anything that micro sheds off of the system wouldn't have any PFAS in it either. Certainly, we can't really speak to the sort of how the system decomposes or breaks down, but if there's no PFAS in the system, there wouldn't be any PFAS in anything that came off of it.
Understood. All right. Well, thank you for turning it around so quickly for us. And I know that you kind of consolidated some of the 10 points in the request for proposal into your report that has been made public. And I think most people have had at least a preliminary opportunity to review. But let me ask commission members if they have any questions for you or thoughts to share.
Hey, John, just before we move to that, just for clarification, our letter does address each of the 10 questions. So we responded exactly the way they were requested. I just consolidate them for the purpose of the meeting tonight.
Right. And you stated that more articulately than I. I agree with you. I agree. You did address all 10 topics that we had requested. Hans, any thoughts or concerns or questions?
I don't, it's in terms of the stormwater discharge, having the existing discharge go directly into the existing system, probably preferred. I don't know who's echo I'm hearing, but
yeah, Ron, it might be yours.
There we go.
Yeah, because you were echoing there, Hans. Could you say that again? I didn't get most of what you said.
So I think that the concern about having the drainage system connect into the existing system has always been sort of a concern all along. And I think if there's potential for additional detention so that it just doesn't go into a straight pipe into the brook, I think that's appropriate. I know that it's a space constrained site, so it's going to be somewhat challenging to do that. But I do agree with that recommendation.
Thanks. Tom Palmer, any thoughts, questions, concerns?
There's still things that I have questions about. I don't really need to have them answered now, just to let you know. For instance, the question of shedding of plastics. We heard that the plastics evidently weren't manufactured with PFAS in the components. On the other hand, simply the plastic itself breaking up into small pieces and going into the wetlands is a kind of pollution. I don't really think we have heard how this stuff will deteriorate. In that vein, I did look at the product description from Brock, Phil, I guess. All it said about the infill or the padding, the loose stuff that will absorb impact, is that it's loblolly pine. I don't see how that won't start to rot as soon as it's wetted, and it will be wetted when it rains. Certainly, I've seen what happens to fiberboard and pine lumber that isn't treated. It disappears very rapidly. So that's another concern of mine. I don't really understand how it can work without rotting immediately. Another question I have is, we have to protect the wetlands. That's our responsibility. And I think because this project abuts wetlands directly, you have to ask, how does the water get into those wetlands, and how will the project change that? If the water that currently supplies those wetlands is diverted elsewhere, well, that's an adverse impact. That dries up the wetlands. That's what we're supposed to prevent. On this question of temperature, it's hard for me to imagine that water won't get heated up going through this plastic material that gets very hot. It just seems it will get heated up, and the only way it will get cooled off is if places it goes absorbs the heat. I think if you run it through a pipe, I don't really know that it will cool off by going through a pipe. I would say that we could find that out more accurately simply by observing what happens to water that falls on the existing plastic fields. We don't know that. We could go to the drain from those fields after a storm and take the temperature of the water. That would be more convincing to me than anything I've heard so far as to whether the water will be hot coming off the fields. So those are three areas that to me seem to still need to be cleared up in my own mind. And that's my comment.
All right, thanks, Tom. But can I ask you, the three that I just took notes on, the wood rotting,
yeah,
unless it's got some preservative added, I got that. The second one though, I got lost because you said if the water is diverted away from the wetlands.
Well, that's what the system plan suggests. You remember that herringbone pattern of drains.
Yes.
And there's two pipes that go straight to the brook on either side of the field, and those drains were intended to connect with those pipes. And the first hearing on this issue, I showed a picture of one of those head walls running, even in dry weather. And Mr. Hunter said, well, it's probably connected to groundwater, which is, I think he was correct about that. At any rate, that is a pathway for the rain that lands on the field to go to the wetland. It will go through a pipe to the brook. And hence, is that what it's doing now? I don't think so. I think somehow it's getting to the wetlands rather than to the brook, either as groundwater or runoff. So there's a little starvation effect.
It is, Tom, and I think your third point was that the water's not going to cool off if it goes into the pipe. But I think you're talking about, and maybe this should go to Chris Huntress, but you're talking about the original design. The recommendation, as I understood it from Sean Reardon and Ron Myrick, was to redirect it rather than putting it into that existing drainage pipe and dumping it into the brook, was to redirect it into the wetlands.
Yeah, well, I agree that might help to address that issue. But of course, we haven't seen any plan incorporating that idea. So
I
I'm
agree. I agree. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you were talking about the currently existing design that the applicant has filed with us, as opposed to the recommendations by Tetra Tech.
Right.
Okay, understood completely. Thanks, Don. Wendy, any thoughts, questions, concerns?
Yes, thank you, John. My remaining concerns really focus on the debris of the breakdown of the turf. And perhaps this is a question for Mr. Huntress. I recall several months ago at one of our earlier hearings that you had said that there would be an ongoing need requirement for the town to routinely vacuum, I guess was the word, the fields to remove the debris. And my concern is if the town is not able to do that routine maintenance, what would happen to that debris?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to answer some of
Yes,
those
please,
now?
please, Chris, thank you.
Excellent question, Wendy. And Tom, I've got some answers for you as well, but it wasn't vacuuming. It's really sweeping and grooming. The infill gets displaced as athletes play on the surface, particularly in the goal mouth areas and other areas of heavy foot action. So there's a sweeping process that occurs where the infill is there's a brush that's dragged behind, say, a John Deere tractor or another type of maintenance vehicle, and it would redistribute that infill into the lower areas. But things that are picked up off the field, that broom will have a magnet that goes along behind it. So things like bobby pins or cleats or other things that come off of players as they're on the field that might be metal would be picked up that way. And then any other debris would be picked up kind of through that sweeping process, because the infill gets kind of turned over, and anything that's larger than the infill gets swept up into a sieve, if you will, and then filtered. The infill is filtered back into the surface, and the larger components are taken away. So that cleaning process is really just a sweeping and grooming process. If the town isn't capable of doing that, or doesn't have the resources to do it, they can outsource that. And we typically recommend our clients have a 2-year maintenance agreement with the manufacturer that puts the turf in, so that they can teach them how to maintain this system and do it for them for the first 2 years. But certainly that maintenance system or maintenance contract can be extended beyond the 2 years. There's no reason that it couldn't be. Did that answer your question?
Well, sort of. It leads me to a few more questions, clarifying questions. When you speak of sweeping, it makes it sound so easy, like sweeping my kitchen floor. But I'm guessing that it's rather labor intensive if this is something that you're suggesting that the town have a 2-year maintenance agreement for. Could you maybe explain like what the process is? Is this something that is quick and easy, or is much more involved?
No, it's actually not terribly difficult. It takes much less time to maintain a synthetic turf field than it does a natural grass field. So the equipment that comes along behind a tractor would include a rotary brush, and then that sieve or a hopper that runs right behind the brush that filters out any of the bigger material. You've got your magnetic drag bar as well, picking up bobby pins and other things that come off. And then you've got a groomer, which gets a little bit deeper into the turf and kind of fluffs up, if you will, the infill, and that helps in the displacement. That whole process takes about 2 hours for somebody to go out with the equipment on the field and rake and groom the field to the point where it's surfaceable and playable again. So it's not incredibly labor intensive, and you're doing this once a month. You want to do it, a second time that month before a Friday night game or something, then go ahead. You can do it, but you don't really need to do it more often than once a month.
And again, if that grooming is not done, then what would be the worst case scenario? What would happen to the debris?
Well, the debris wouldn't get picked up if it's on the field. What would be more concerning for me would not necessarily be the debris, say bobby pins and other things that are on the field, but more the goal mouth areas and the areas of heavy foot action where infill is dispersed and starts to get the infill would then be much thinner. We have about a 2-inch tall turf system, and about 1.5 inches of that is filled with infill. So if you start to lose that infill in certain places, you're going to worry about compaction in those areas. You're going to worry about impact attenuation in those areas and injury to players. So it's that's what would concern me more than the debris.
Thank you.
You're saying that, just to be clear, you're saying that when the turf fields are not maintained, there is a higher risk of impact injuries.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. If I could, I'd like to just touch on the drainage system a little bit, because I think there's some misconception as to how this site drains. We did provide a presentation, but admittedly it was some time ago, probably last spring. Water does migrate through this system, percolates down vertically into the subsurface soils or the subsurface drainage system. But predominantly, most of this stormwater is handled through infiltration into the groundwater below. And that's true for storm events up to about the 25-year event, and that's shown in our drainage calculations that we provided previously. So really, the drain lines that go off and would go to Pine Tree Brook would only see water during significantly heavier storm events when the infiltration was not able to handle stormwater, above that 25-year storm. Excuse me. I did talk to our civil today, who designed the drainage system and ran the calculations about potentially putting the outfall along the edge that would be closest to the wetland system. There is room to do it there, and we could evenly disperse outfall along that entire edge of the field so that it would feed the wetland, as Tom had said, more appropriately. Again, most of that rainfall during most events would infiltrate into the ground and feed the wetland system through a groundwater process, but we can certainly put the outfalls along the edge of the field as they're adjacent to that wetland system, so that in a heavier event, the stormwater would get into the wetland system and not go directly into Pine Tree Brook. So that's certainly possible to do and not difficult. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you, and I know you've got other commission members that may want to ask
Thank you,
questions.
Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody for their comments. My position is not to discharge directly into Pine Tree Brook. A filtration system would be advisable from my point of view. The use of the wetland initially as a filtration system might be a very valuable study for us. And if that is successful, all well and good. If it is not, we could back into other recourses. One other thought is that the Lower Gar Road field is in a floodplain, and I was curious as to whether or not Tetra Tech has any data or experience in the impact of flooding on artificial turf.
Yeah, but peripherally, not as a sort of design consultant, but we've sort of seen evidence of sort of the older systems that have rubber infill and floodplains. If you have a flooding event, some of that gets floated more from static conditions than from sort of buoyancy. So, I mean, wood floats, so I would expect some of the material to be sort of floatable on the surface, but I would also expect a lot of it to be held in place by the turf system. One thing, just I didn't understand that the infiltration, the field infiltrates. So that's actually a great thing as far as the micro shedding is concerned, because if the field, if all of the storms underneath 25-year storm infiltrate through the soil, then any micro shedded plastic is gonna get bound up in the soil directly below the system. So just to sort of add that on. But as far as the flooding goes, I would imagine a portion of the infill is buoyant. I don't think anything else would float, but the infill might make its way to the wetland in that situation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm hopeful that I could just address the floodplain issue if I could.
Yes, that would be helpful.
So the 100-year flood elevation, or the bordering land subject to flooding that's jurisdictional under both the Wetlands Act and your local bylaw, is defined as the 35-foot contour elevation. And that is outside of our limit of work. It is really inboard, predominantly inboard of the wetland itself. So we are not impacting anything within the 100-foot. I did review the FEMA maps today just to double check that. There is an area called Zone X, which is between the 100 to 500-year storm event that runs through about the middle of the field. That is, again, up to what they call the 500-year storm, or the 0.2% chance that a storm event will get that large. That is not jurisdictional under either the act or the local bylaw. So it's really the 100-foot, I'm sorry, not the 100-foot, the 100-year flood elevation is the 35, and that's well outside of our limit of work.
That's helpful. Thank you, Chris.
You.
Arthur, does that respond to your question?
It does in part. I just would like to see the maps.
We did submit in the NOI, we've got the FEMA maps in there, and we gave a presentation on June 12th, which specifically addressed the 100-year flood elevation. And you have a memo in the file from us dated March 29th that also goes through where the location of the 100-year flood elevation is. So if you need help finding any of those documents, please let me know.
I remember those references and I'll revisit them. Thank you. And I think this information will be helpful to others outside of the commission.
Right. Did I Hans, Tom, Wendy, Arthur, did I miss anybody, commission members? I did talk to Ingrid, and she was unable to attend tonight, but has great interest in the chemical components of this. And I for one, I think we all value her insight into these. And she asked whether or not I thought it would be continued. I know that there has been a request to continue the hearing further to give some of the Grass for Guile folks a better opportunity to respond to the Tetra Tech. And I know that Ingrid would appreciate that, because she wanted to be able to participate in the discussion. And so if there are no other questions from the commission members, I would open it up. And I know there are a number of different spokespersons, if you will. And Paul, I always look to you as probably the leader of the pack, so to speak.
John,
I didn't know if you wanted to make a comment or ask a question. And I know you did ask for a continuance. Yeah, Hans?
Yeah, before we go on, I just want to confirm with Mr. Huntress about the feasibility of modifying the drainage and to utilize the wetland, if that, is that still under consideration, or is that?
Are you asking me?
I guess I'm asking John to ask you.
Oh no, Hans, ask you. You're a commissioner. Ask away.
So you did say that there is space to utilize the wetland for some of the overflow to prevent the drainage to go directly to the brook. Is that correct?
There is room along that edge of the field that addresses the wetland to be able to put multiple outfall points so that we would evenly disperse that water, if you will, as it would leave the system. So yes, there's room to do that. We have no objection to doing it. Happy to make that change.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and as we are having discussion about potentially closing the hearing, I think we would like to see any design changes or updates, including any that we've discussed otherwise, including the one I requested about the traffic control at the bottom of the to prevent people from parking. I'd like to see an updated plan before we try and close the hearing. So
we'd be happy to do this. We're just obviously getting this information
sure
tonight, like everybody else is. So we'll take some time to revise those plans and get them over.
Okay, thanks, John. That's all I had.
Oh, good. Thank you, Hans. Paul, question, comment?
Yeah, John, thank you. As I have mentioned in an email to folks that I really feel that first of all, we didn't get much of a chance to take a look at this thing. My first look at this report was this morning. I understand that the in some ways this is sort of, as I mentioned there, that this is sort of replaying some of the stuff that went on in Martha's Vineyard, and the Tetra Tech folks were there and they made their presentation, and there was a rebuttal that was mounted, and so the two panels who weighed in, the two major panels of Martha's Vineyard Commission, and then later on the planning board, did not see eye to eye on this thing. So I think that it would be useful and valuable for the commission to be able to hear from these other folks. I noticed that throughout the report, much of the Tetra Tech report rests on the idea that based on their experience, that there isn't any problem with PFAS in the materials, but there have been other scientists, including Kyla Bennett of the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility and Graham Peasley at the University of Notre Dame, who've tested a bunch of these component pieces and actually have found PFAS in them. And the Tetra Tech folks just mentioned right now that it's not really within the thing that they've been doing very much to take a look at things like environmental degradation to the materials once they're there, as well as precursor elements that are there. And I know both Kyla and Graham have talked about that. And in fact, they've both noted that some of those elements actually create a much bigger problem than problems in sort of just the existing pieces that are there, that new pieces that you might take a look at and might be tested in a lab. I mean, there's just lots of little things. Wendy asked the question about microplastics. Microplastics are a huge problem, separate from the rest of it. In fact, it's a huge problem in Europe, where they're discovering a tremendous amount of microplastics. Thousands and thousands of tons of microplastics are showing up in the waters off portions of Europe, mostly because they have so many plastic pitches there. So I think that there are a lot of elements, I think, that still need to be discussed. Even the idea of shunting the water into the wetlands, if it turns out that PFAS are a problem, and also there seems to be some idea that the PFAS levels perhaps are bigger in the soil, or higher in the soil now than they could possibly be, as if in the turf elements, it's sort of this sort of suggestion that one cancels the other out somehow, when in fact PFAS are in fact bioadditive because they don't go away. So anything that you add to PFAS that are there just raises the PFAS level. I think that, as I said, I think that there are a lot of so if PFAS is a problem, and if PFAS can get into the water, it seems to me that it creates a bigger problem for the commission, who is watching out to safeguard the wetlands, if you're dumping additional PFAS into the wetlands themselves. anyway, this is, a lot of this, I admit, is way above my pay grade. So I think that it would be useful to take a pause, to take a look at some of this stuff, and to bring in a couple of people who have credentials and who have potentially alternative views, so that the commission can weigh these things. And
Understood.
that's what I've got.
Thank you, Paul. I see some hands raised. I know, Mary Firabend, your hand is raised. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. My first question is the woman Ingrid, who you said you waited for, is she a voting conservation committee member?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. The next thing is, I feel like we're going back and, we are going in circles. We're not trusting the science. We've all been on the same Zoom now for over an hour listening to the test results. And there are professionals in this room that have presented. And we just heard from a member in this group that is still asking for more professionals, different professionals. So I just want to highlight the fact that the town has repeated the same testing 2 times, found money to pay for that second testing. We still are making no progress. I was really hoping, and I'm disappointed for the second time now in a row, that we have not gone to vote. Maps have been provided by Huntress for several months now. I know that now we are considering draining into the wetlands, but at some point, when are we going to trust the science? The numbers don't lie. I just want to bring that point to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mary. Tim, I see your hand raised. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Commissioner. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Tim Anastasia.
We can.
A volunteer coach with Milton Youth Football, as well as deep roots in the Milton community, being born and raised here. And I must say, I'm a little embarrassed that almost every question was answered. And it seemed to me that a lot of the people either on the commission or Paul there just don't trust the answers. We did hire, like Mary said, for a second time, professionals, experts in their field. They gave us what their answers are, and we either take them as fact or we don't. And if we don't take them as fact, then why did we hire them? They said the water temperature does not rise. They want the drainage to be in front of the wetlands, so we do it. They said the temperature, typically on the field does not raise because, or doesn't affect the water temperature because it's usually cooler and raining, which is kind of common sense. They said there's almost no PFAS in the product that this community wants. This is what they said as fact. So I really don't understand, why can't we vote? Like, why aren't we voting? Everything that we asked has been answered. Our children are still playing on this field and they're getting hurt daily. We need action. There's no reason to prolong the vote. So I'm requesting we vote tonight. We vote now. We have all the information that we need to vote. So, Commissioner, that's my question. Why aren't we voting?
I think there are 2 reasons. One of them is that you heard the question from Hans to Chris Huntress. Can you do the recommended design change? Because keep in mind that we are looking at the recommendations from Tetra Tech, and they have proposed a design change. We need to know.
And Huntress said yes. Huntress, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. I'm sorry, Commissioner. But Christian, did you say you could do it?
Yes. Right. So now he has to do it.
Yes.
We operate on the record. You heard the question from Hans. Can you get us a design change that shows where you're going to put this into the wetlands? I mean, we are dotting I's and crossing T's. We need an engineering plan from an engineer that says this is the outfall. This is where it's going. The current plans don't work, or there's a better way to do it.
I understand. So I agree with you. So then to drill this down, if he provides plans that show that it can drain into the wetlands, that means that every question has been answered. So once he provides that, can we go to vote?
I think we can. I know that Paul indicated that he's got some people that need a chance to respond. I'm very grateful for Tetra Tech working because the contract was delayed, but they got right on it and they submitted the report. You've seen the report. I think they answered the questions that we had. But I believe that some of the opponents from the Grass for Guile group would like a chance to respond to that, and I think they're entitled to do that.
Oh, okay. All right. So from what I heard from that statement was the Huntress presents a new plan with the new drainage. Then all of the necessary questions that the Conservation Committee has put out there have been answered. And we will just listen to Paul's statement next time, and then we'll go to vote.
I don't think it's Paul's statement. I think he was talking about having some other people come in. But essentially,
are these
you are
people
correct.
hired by the town, or they hired by? So my question is, so he brings someone in. Do they have a heavier hand than the actual company that the town hired to provide the answers? That's my question.
No,
so why are we listening to them?
It's up to the commission to assign the weight to the information that we're receiving. It's up to us to make the decision based upon the data that's presented. So no, we don't have a heavier hand.
Do we feel that what was provided is accurate right now? Does the commission feel what has been provided by Tetra Tech is fact and valid? Like, do we trust what they said is accurate? Or do you, Commissioner,
Are you looking for a pre-vote? Because that's not going to happen.
I know. I'm just asking you if you
got a
guys
straw
believe
vote that you're looking for, or what?
Does the commission believe what they just heard is truth? Can someone answer that?
Sure, I can. I assign. I have high regard for Tetra Tech. We've used them in the past. We've used some others. There have been a number of people. I assign great credibility and weight to some of the others. I know that, for instance, Kerry Snyder from the Neponset River Association asked some very good questions. I assign weight to that. Yeah, I do. I believe the questions have been answered, by the way, because I went back when I saw the report. I went back and I looked at I know what our questions were, but I wanted to know what other questions were from some of those that had voiced concerns. And I think those questions have been answered.
Okay.
I said, I think they have been answered. Yes, I do.
All right,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
I'm grateful for Tetra Tech, but we're not going to do a straw vote. And I think from a due process perspective, and by the way, if we vote tonight or we vote, next month, the field's not going in this fall. I mean, it's just as a practice, and we've had this discussion before. So yes, it's been delayed, but there's no downside to completing the process at this juncture. Just as there was no downside to awaiting the information that we just received from Tetra Tech. It was worth the wait. It answered the questions. I believe it answered the questions that we had.
I understand that, but there's no reason. Like, if you don't hire an expert if you're not going to take what they say is valid, right? And then don't wait for a vote just because you can. Don't wait what you can do today. If for next week. It's just not a feasible way to live life. So my guess is I'm hoping we do a vote next month.
I sure hope so.
Because we've been doing this we're running around in circles, and eventually you just cut corners, right? Like,
no, we're trying not to cut any corners. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, all right, thank you for listening to me.
Steve Kelleher.
You're muted, sir.
We can't hear you, Steve.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to Paul, I just received the letter this morning, so I just started to review it. I do have some questions regarding the letter. In a couple of places, for example, it references based on data, or it references, very likely, or references, like, for example, just in the first question, and I'm just curious because I've done my own searches on the internet, and I found other data that may be in conflict. So I guess I'm curious, I mean, did you get a report in addition to this letter? Because I don't, like, for example, the last question also references a project, and we have no reference what project that is. It says there's a project done in 2021. Well, what project was that? So I guess, again, I'm just trying to go through.
If you're talking about the test data, that was not done by Tetra Tech. That was done by Alpha Labs. I think that's what you're referring to in 2021. That's a recognized federally licensed laboratory. I think that's what you're referring to, but I'm not positive. That's part of the public record. That we've had that in the public record since day one.
Muted again.
Sorry
Steve,
about that.
there you
So
go.
what project, yeah, so what project is that? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this. So what?
Testing that was done in 2021, I believe, is what you're referring to, and that was the testing done by Alpha Labs.
Okay. And do we have the data that's referenced in the first question?
I don't know what you mean by the first question.
The first response, I'm sorry. It's the first response, it's the fourth line down. It says based on available data regarding the PFAS concentration levels. Because it seems like when you do research, it seems like it's not consistent. I mean, there's other data out there.
I apologize. I'm not sure where you're reading from.
I think the question to Mr. Reardon is, what's the source of the data that you're referencing in response number one?
So there was data provided with the application materials that gave a bar chart comparing the components of the turf system with the recent samples that were done on the superficial soils.
Right. That was the question. That was the answer.
So I'm sorry. So maybe I have to go up and get that information. So it's not in this report then. That's a separate report. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out where it is. That's
There is a figure in the submittal materials that indicates what the contaminant, the PFAS levels in the turf system are. We also have ancillary experience on other projects, but they're unrelated to this. It just serves as the body of our experience.
Okay. All right. And I'll just finalize or finish up by saying that this does continue to be a level, both the federal and the state level. In fact, and the commission's probably aware of this, there's actually two bills tomorrow, two Senate hearings tomorrow, S523 and S524 in the Massachusetts State Senate. So I just bring that up as this continues to be an issue, both, again, nationally and locally. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Steve Johnson, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm definitely in support. I'm an abutting neighbor to Lower Guile Field, so I definitely have a vested interest in this project. I am definitely in support of the turfing of the field for the kids to play. I will tell you is that I'll share similar sentiments that I think it's time to get to a vote sooner than later on this project, and definitely see that it'll be likely next month. But it's clear that the Grass for Guile folks really are just waiting, and it's a stall tactic to get the message to get the answer that they're hoping to get, despite the fact that we've had all of these studies that we continue to waste money on, further money on, to tell us the same things that were already done in the original testing. Some of these folks have houses that have PFAS materials in their own roofs that are incredibly close to the brook's edge. And, when I looked at the membership for Grass for Guile, many of these individuals that are a part of this, that claim for child safety and all of these other elements, are all part of the same neighborhood. And I don't know about you, Commissioner, but child safety is not a neighborhood issue. It's a neighborhood, it's an issue for everyone. And so I think we've been held hostage a bit to this process by the Grass for Guile folks. And at some point it's, again, everyone's got their research that they do, but my doctor tells me all the time I should never use WebMD to diagnose myself. Right?
Good advice.
Right. So it's a similar sentiment that we can all do those same Google searches, but we've hired professionals and it's time to listen to professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, very much. And I always, I guess I've got one more hand up. Is that Tom Mario?
Yes, it is.
Thanks,
So
Tom.
I heard a statement that the Conservation Commission needs everything to be on the record, such as the revised plan. Since that's how you operate, I'd like each commissioner to state exactly what they are looking for so that that data can be provided to them and stop further delays. I have not heard a concise question as to what exactly they're looking for. I'd like each one of them to go on the record as to what that item is so that it can be provided to them, answered, and everyone move on.
No, that's not the way the hearing works, sorry. But I will tell you this, that the concise, precise, written questions numbering 10 is part of the public record. That formed the scope of work that went to 5 vendors. Those questions are in writing, they're in the public record, they've been available to you, and I bet you've already received them. So those are the questions that we had. Now, there are other questions that have been raised by other people in a public setting, and by due process, they're entitled to ask those questions. And if they can be answered, and I think that that's exactly what Tetra Tech did. They answered the questions we had. It's in writing. You cannot be more precise than those questions.
I agree 100% with you. So
we're ready to move on then.
I'm very confused then as to why it cannot proceed.
The record that we're referring to is we operate on the basis of design plans that are stamped by a professional engineer. And there are, go into any of the public records for any of the projects, you'll see stamped plans that are approved by us after a vote. We don't have the new design plan yet. Chris says that he can do it. I think it can be done. It was a recommendation by Tetra Tech, and Chris says it can be done, but it hasn't been done yet. We need to have that plan that shows the distribution network for the now redirected water, so it does not go into Pine Tree Brook. Those are the questions that were asked. They've now been answered. It can be done, so let's do it.
That sounds excellent. So we're waiting on the revised plan. That's all we're waiting on.
Yes, we're waiting on the revised plan. You are correct. And
Nothing
we're
else.
also waiting. There are going to be comments from the Grass for Guile folks that apparently they want to contest some of the findings made by Tetra Tech. But that's part of the process. And no, we don't wait one more than another. We look for scientific reliability when we individually and collectively believe that we've got good, solid, reliable scientific data. We're going to move on it. And I believe that can be done at the next meeting.
Do you believe you have reliable scientific data now?
I think what we've seen is pretty solid.
Excellent.
But
Great news.
I've got an open mind. If there's somebody that can say, no, that's not true, then I'm ready to listen.
So as long as you think that it's good information, excellent. Great news.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Thanks. We're going to have to move fast now. We're running out of time, folks. Deborah Milbauer and Liz O'Rourke, and then we're going to move on to the next item. Deborah. By the way, we're going to address, Deborah, your no parking sign under additional business, because it's a good point. I think you got support here, so don't worry about that one.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, my remarks are 2 minutes. I wrote them down so I could read them super fast and not waste time fumbling for my words. So 2 minutes,
Perfect.
very fast.
Perfect.
Thank you for sharing the report with us by email. I really appreciate it. I'm requesting that this board allow abutters and those all over Milton, not just abutters, but there is a broad-based consensus. Hundreds of people have signed this, not just abutters. And I'm requesting that the board allow folks time to review the report and submit questions for the vendor. We are working with academic researchers who study plastic turf runoff, and we would like to give them an opportunity to comment on this report. The questions and therefore the answers in this report that we only just received today did not capture the information that is needed to make a decision about runoff. There are many chemicals in plastic products. To only ask about PFAS is a biased way to assess environmental impact. To accurately understand the impact of plastic on conservation land, one needs to look at the full scope of the product components, not just one set of a chemical, one chemical, PFAS. Yes, PFAS is of urgent concern, but ignoring the hundreds of other chemicals in plastic is irresponsible and misleading. Therefore, the methodology of the questions that were asked and therefore the responses is flawed because it was only asked about one thing. The suggestion that the chemical should run through the wetlands as a filter is theoretically accurate. Wetlands will act as a filter, but it is environmentally irresponsible. Isn't this board's mandate to protect the wetlands? Since when does runoff from plastic trump protecting wetlands? That's the whole mandate of this commission. And where is the evidence that there won't be a temperature change in the water because the rain will cool down the turf? Citations are missing to back up this assertion, which I've never heard before. The devastating impact of plastic microfibers in our oceans and our bodies is so universally understood and agreed upon that it is unfathomable to me that a report of this kind would exclude the impact of plastic microfiber runoff into the environment. And I realize you were just answering the questions, but the questions excluded the full scope of information. Every one of us know that turf sheds plastic, and all the literature backs this up. With all due respect, this report was written by a firm whose prior reports have been a source of contention in other communities. For example, the report referred to data found on the website of a plastic turf manufacturer. Brock Infill's entire business model is to sell plastic turf. Why is a professional engineering firm citing the website of a commercial business who stands to benefit from the data it posts? Speaking of citations, there were multiple scientific assertions in this report that are all missing citations. Because I only saw the report today, I did not have time to rebut each inaccurate assertion individually, but we plan to do so. Many researchers have published data counter to the report who have agreed to testify on our behalf. It is not equitable to have one side present data and the other not given a chance to rebut with researchers and experts, as was done here tonight. And John, I appreciate that you actually noted that earlier. Lastly, and I'm actually, somebody already said it actually, just so you all know, there's statewide legislation pending right now seeking data on the environmental impact as well. Senate Bill 523 is called an act to further research and report analysis of athletic performance services, their safety and recommendations. And Senate Bill 524, an act to consider the safety of artificial grass and turf services. In conclusion, given that most of us just saw the report today, we ask that time is given for us to review the report more carefully and be given an opportunity to ask the vendor for clarification on multiple assertions. And I will add, I find it inappropriate, and I respect and appreciate everybody's input from all different views, but folks who are concerned about the chemicals in this plastic and how it'll affect the environment, hundreds of people we have spoken to, we've gotten signatures from hundreds of people, and I don't think it's fair to say, oh, they don't care, it's not their responsibility to neighborhood to care about kids. I find that disrespectful. I am not critiquing I'm not questioning anyone's interest in this. I understand why people have a vested interest in supporting or opposing. I'm not questioning anyone's motives. I question the data that's presented. So I just want to say there's hundreds of us all over town. We have signatures. We've been in web meetings, Zoom meetings, and so please refrain from stating inaccurate information. And I'm really grateful to the board for allowing this process to unfold equitably. I know you all are anxious to get it done, but this is about an equitable process. So I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me the time to say my remarks.
Thank you, Deborah. I think the last speaker is Liz O'Rourke. Go ahead, Liz.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for letting people talk tonight. It's been very interesting to hear all the different information that we've been getting. I did have a question about the data for the Chris Huntress, I believe, said the 25-year and 100-year storm data. He referenced it in terms of it wouldn't, be a problem. But I know that, I guess my question is to Chris Huntress, is that data he's using for 25-year storms and 100-year storms, is that recent? Is that based on recent data, or is he using numbers from 20 years ago? I just want to find out where he cites that information from in terms of flooding and the rain.
You're talking about the flooding data. Yeah, he was referencing 25 years. That's a pretty standard engineering design term. And I think there are two sources. Chris, you can probably help me out. Or a lot of people can help me out on this one. As to one is National Oceanographic. Tom Palmer, you can give me the two different definitions of 5-year, 10-year, 25-year, 100-year storms.
I think of them as elevations, and elevations you can draw on a map.
Sure,
and
but
what it says is that there's one chance in 100 that a water from a storm will reach this elevation in any given year. But I think Liz's question was, are those elevations that Chris applied, how long have they been in effect? I think a lot of people recognize that the ones that we've been using for years have been overtaken by events that are not really very useful anymore.
Yes, that is correct.
Chris, do you want to respond to that, where the data came from?
I do. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
The data comes from, and I'm trying to pull it up, the most recent FEMA maps, which are updated by Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. And that's what drives the elevation of the 100-year storm event, which is elevation 35, as Tom had said. It's based elevationally. The drainage calculations that we refer to when we talk about storm events being the 2, 10, 25-year storm event, those are engineering standards done through different modeling processes. TR55, it happens to be the one that we've used. I am a landscape architect, not the civil engineer, but John Barros, our civil, did come in and explain drainage to the commission. I'd be happy to ask a more specific question about where he got the storm data, but it's current.
I'd like to know how old the storm data is.
It's current.
What is it? What is current? What year?
Now, today. That's the standard that's used today.
So that data is from 2023.
That data is in the stormwater report, and it's stamped by the civil engineer, and it's as current as is readily available for any storm data. The elevations for the 100-year flood are off the FEMA maps, and I would have to just check the date of the FEMA maps, which I can do and probably get back to you in just a minute, because they're in our notice of intent application.
Okay, I'd just like to know what year that data is from.
That data is current, Ms. O'Rourke.
So from FEMA?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll get you the FEMA. I'll get you the FEMA dates.
Okay, I'm interested in the FEMA because that is relevant to what we're discussing. And if the date of that data is 2016, that was 7 years ago. And I think things have changed, and I think we all know that. So that's why I was concerned. I also wanted to thank Tom Palmer for bringing up a lot of the issues that I was concerned about when I read the report. I'm also very perplexed why there is no data and why they were working off of data that really is not accurate. And I also, the Brock fill is, as Tom Palmer pointed out, and as Chris Huntress has said, Brock fill is wood. It is small, tiny pieces of wood. It looks like grape nut cereal, except it's much lighter. If you had some in the palm of your hand and you blew on it, it would just blow away. It's very light. I can't understand how that will protect. I really don't. It's just going to be all over the place. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Rourke. All right, and that's the last hand that I see. This will be continued until what's the next date? Anybody have the date?
The
Second
14th
Tuesday.
of November.
14th. Thanks, Phil, very much.
John, before we move on,
Yes.
I do have a request, Mr. Reardon. If you could, since we're asking Mr. Huntress to provide an updated design, if you could cite some of your sources, I think the members of the public might appreciate that. Maybe reissue the letter with, some of the information that you're referring to, if possible.
Yeah, sure, we'll do what we can, but just keep in mind, we were asked to provide our opinions and our informed opinions. This is not a PhD thesis.
This is no data.
This is our opinion.
Liz, you have to.
I'm sorry.
Mute it, please.
So, Mr. Reardon, if you were referring to any specific data sets in your responses, can you just update the letter to add references to those?
Certainly.
Thank you.
One note, just a footnote. There was discussion earlier about how rainfall under the largest storms infiltrates, and that's a little confusing to me. I think it should be addressed in the revised plan, because I recall Mr. Huntress saying that there was an impermeable bottom of the system to prevent fines from coming up when the groundwater rises and getting into the voids that the system uses to provide, space for water. So I think I would need in this new plan another elevation, so to speak, of the entire system, showing all the parts and what they're made of.
Mr. Chair, just as a clarification, this system does not have an impermeable bottom, and it never did. What you're referring to, Mr. Palmer, is there are filter fabric layers that are sandwiched between that would stop fines from migrating either up into the subbase or down below the subbase. So it's a filter fabric that stops those fine migrations. It's not an impermeable barrier.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So this will be continued with the assent of the applicant until November, what is it, 14, Philip?
Yes, the 14th of November.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And hopefully we can conclude on that date with a vote. All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is this is the one that I called out in the beginning. Joe Federico, I saw you come back. Are you here on 1259 Brush Hill Road, lots C and D?
Hi, John. Yes, I am here. Chris Thomas from the BSC group, I believe, is also here as well. If he's still here.
Yep. Hi, good evening.
There he is.
Yep, we're here for 1259 Brush Hill Road.
You'll have to refresh our memory. This has been continued so many times, and I know that's been a point of frustration for you.
Yeah, let me hold on, let me share my screen real quick. Yeah, so to circle back from I believe our last hearing, probably April or May of 2022. We were requesting an RDA for Lot C at 1259 Brush Hill Road, and an amendment to our order of conditions for Lot D. These are two single-family house lots. Lot C is outside of the 100-foot BVW, and we're requesting an RDA. The reason this couldn't be voted on back in 2022 was because we're in an estimated habitat for salamanders, and we needed a MESA conservation management permit, which we received on October 6th. So we have that in hand. I believe that was distributed to the Conservation Commission as well.
Haven't seen it.
Yeah, I don't think, Philip, do you know if we've received the most recent?
I can
It was
check
cut.
file. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it should have been on October 6th that the commission received the copy from Fisheries and Wildlife from the state. So they approved the CMP for the taking of 1.16 acres for Lot C and Lot D, and the rest of the two properties will become conservation restriction open space. And this is the plan that they have approved as part of the permit.
All right, I give us the big picture here, because I know this is one that goes back. I haven't seen it, so, and I don't think the other commissioners have either. But my understanding is that the hang up for the state was we had required a wildlife corridor, 50 feet wide, and
Yep,
then they came back and
right
said,
here.
That's it. And that was, I thought, a great idea, and we voted for it.
Yep.
But then there was a hang up, and part of the hang up was resolved by a conservation restriction. Tell us where those are going, because I think we had some initial discussions about whether or not the Conservation Commission would agree to accept the conveyance of the restriction to us. And we're delighted to get any kind of a conservation restriction. But tell us what it's required for and where it is.
Yeah, so the basically the limit of clearing for these two lots that's shown here, that will be surveyed, have bounds, signs posted for the conservation restriction, and that limit of clearing will be the limit for the conservation restriction for the two properties. That will be recorded.
All right, I think we need to see it in hand. This is probably about the most sensitive environmental area in Milton, in addition to being an ACEC. So I think we ought to at least have the plan. And I haven't seen it, so I apologize if others have. But has anybody seen it? No. And I don't think none of us have seen it.
I think we need, Mr. Chairman, a full update. It's been, as you said, a period of time. And an updating of all the materials since our last site walk would be very valuable, at least from my perspective.
When is the last time, Chris, that we addressed this? You said it was in 22?
Yeah, it was spring of 2022. Was probably the last hearing.
What was the last action we took?
The reason that a vote couldn't happen was because we needed the conservation management permit, which we have just received. from MISA.
If I recall correctly, there was updated mapping that, right, that kind of triggered all this, and then, yeah.
Right, the 2000, I believe it's the 2019 mapping of the estimated habitat. That's what led to the permit being needed.
Well, I really do not want to do anything that delays you further, because I know how frustrating it's been for these last however many months. That's a long, spring of 2022 is a long time ago. And I think everything is as it should be with the wildlife corridor and the conservation restrictions. But I really do think that we need, as Arthur said, we need kind of a full briefing with the new plans and permit in front of us, particularly if we're going to, officially and formally accept the conservation restriction, which we should. I think it's a grand idea. But Philip, is that something you could check to see what we've got in the file, and then you have that delivered to us as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr.
And Joe,
Chairman,
I apologize to you.
And Phil, if you
Go ahead.
Phil, if you don't have it, I will forward the permit.
Mr.
Sure, I'll
Chairman,
check to
just
see if,
I'm sorry.
I'll check to see if I have the permit tomorrow. If not, I'll email you.
Okay.
Arthur, go ahead.
I was just wondering if this is something that might be included in Saturday's work.
I'll have to defer to Phil. If you can get it to us fast enough, sure.
It can be done electronically.
I'll work on it tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have it tomorrow.
All right, if we can get it tomorrow, then Chris, and I know, Joe, it's been a long process for you, but I think you've dotted the i's and crossed the t's. So why don't we put this on for Saturday? So we're going first to Gun Hill, then we're going to 31 Harlan Street. We don't have to go on site, but it actually might be helpful if we did go on site, and we could get it done on Saturday. It would probably be about 10 o'clock or so.
No bounds have been set, so that there's nothing really new to see.
Well, we've got to do it somewhere. So, if we're in a public meeting, which we have to do, and we have to announce it as such, and put it on the agenda, which all is fine. But if there's anybody that was interested, they wouldn't know where we were going to consider it, because the last place we'll be is 31 Holland Street. We could do it there as long as we notice the public if anybody's interested in it. Anybody have a feeling on that, Tom Palmer? I know this is a sensitive area, and Wendy, and well, we all do.
Yeah, I would be willing to move once we have everything, but this permit, which is the new thing, we don't have. And I think we need to discuss that, although I don't know if we need to do it on the site. But how soon can we have it? That's really the issue, I think.
Philip thinks he can get it tomorrow.
Well, good. I'm curious about it. I can't remember us getting another copy of the conservation permit from Heritage. So it should be interesting. And I have questions about CRs too. Like, I wonder if this is going to be one of these CRs we have to remember to renew. That's the first question I have, I guess.
Okay, but the real question is, can we get it done Saturday morning? I think the answer is yes. We'll have a quorum there, and we can do it at 31 Holland Street as long as we don't have to go to the scene. If I don't really care, we can do it anywhere as long as we're in a public setting, in an announced public meeting. We can take a vote.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I hope we'll all have a chance to review it by then.
I think we will. Chris, do you want to be there? Because you can meet us at 31 Holland Street if you want. Or Joe, it doesn't matter.
I can meet you there.
Okay. So we'll put it on, we'll just continue this until Saturday the 14th, and we'll meet at 31 Holland Street, and it'll be at approximately, it might be a little earlier than that because we don't have to travel, somewhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. All right?
That works for me.
All right, good. Perfect. Then we'll continue it until Saturday. Thanks. Which leads us to approval of the minutes. This has been kicked so many times now since March. And I confess that I haven't read the last ones. So if others have read it and are comfortable, I mean, I now I don't know what is in there because I asked Steve to make an amendment. Why don't we do it Saturday? Because I did ask Steve to amend one of the minutes from September, but I don't know if it was the 12th or the 30th. See, and I can describe that, but I'd rather have it in my hand, and I don't know if he made the change, so I don't know what it looks like. So why don't we kick this? And Philip, can you put this on the agenda for Saturday as well?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. And that takes us to additional business. And I don't know if Deborah's still with us, but Hans, you'd be interested in this. I think it's outside the scope of what we were discussing on the Lower Guile Road turf field, but it does relate to that. And Deborah had indicated something that the neighborhood would appreciate, a no parking sign. And some of the neighbors are concerned because people are obviously parking in our jurisdictional wetlands. Hans, I know this is near and dear to your heart. And we're actually looking for changes in the design plan to show the location of the fence. Now I'm going back to the field. But for this purpose, I did call Chase Berkeley because DPW has to do it. I mean, we don't have the signs or the manpower to put it up. But I support the idea. And I don't think this requires anything tonight. However, Deborah, for your benefit, we've been putting up signs ourselves to mark conservation land, and we feel that we have to have a permit application for that. So we filed an RDA. I don't think you have to do anything. We can probably take care of this for you. But we'll have to file an RDA because if we're putting a signpost into our land, then we need to give ourselves permission to do that. I know that sounds like a lot of form over substance, but I think we can get there. However, I have to say to you, we don't have any enforcement power, and if we can put up a sign, I'm not sure that's going to do a whole lot in terms of keeping people from parking there. So I guess it requires some kind of police enforcement for that. I don't know, but we don't have the jurisdiction to do that. The town does. I think the real solution is going to be as part of the Guile Road field, whatever is done there. Part of the design is to put up a fence there and to block access to that land. And then
not a fence, bollards.
What's that? Bollards, yeah.
Yeah, not a fence, but yeah, something that would prevent vehicles from being able to access through there, provided the fire department or whatever emergency access is still allowed. But yeah, that's generally
right. I think the sign we can get done pretty quickly. But the bollards will require some kind of a design plan, because I actually don't know where it would be appropriate to put that. So that's additional.
Happy to mark it out for you.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, no, Chase Berkeley was very cooperative and said, it shouldn't be an issue. So good. We are moving forward, Deborah, and it was a good suggestion. I'm not sure it's going to solve the problem, but it's a start.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Two very quick comments. So the two clearings are right between the bridge and the entrance to the high school property, right? Which I sent you pictures of. But the other clearing that also is really big, even bigger, is at the Elm and Gulliver dead ends where they converge. There's a huge area and the neighbors actually park there also. And just to clarify the sign, one sign is like demarcation that it's conservation land, but another sign that specifically says this, no parking because this is conservation land. And maybe, you know, I know with I don't know if there's pre-existing signs already made or we have, or you all have the discretion to put on it what you want. But I know with the dog waste, the dog waste signs, they'll say, you know, dog waste it contaminates the environment. Please pick up after your dog. It would be good to say, you know, parked cars on conservation land contaminates the environment. We appreciate your not parking here. But the other comment, although I'll just settle for a no parking sign, that's fine too. The other comment is that I do think that it's a deterrent for people. It might not eliminate it, of course, but I don't think not having consequences should deter, just at minimum, just a no parking sign, because people have no idea. I didn't know either you weren't supposed to park there. So people right now don't have any idea. So that's all. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. All right. And Hans, you can be the prime mover on this one, and maybe we can coordinate it with some other barriers that still keep an open access for public safety vehicles. All right.
I think that the two things are super. One is very complicated, obviously, and I was just thinking a quick hit would be just a no parking sign while we're also figuring out the other stuff, which is going to take a lot longer.
I agree with you, and that's I think that's the strategy.
Okay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Any other addition? Yes. Any other additional business? No.
Is there a hand raised?
Where? Oh, I like it all, like a real hand. I was looking for the magic sign. Elizabeth Pyle. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I think maybe we skipped over my matter earlier on the agenda. I'm here to talk about 648 to 652 Canton Ave in Milton, which was on for informational purposes tonight.
Use the old agenda.
I used the old agenda. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm awfully sorry, and I've got all kinds of people waiting for this. I am embarrassed here. I had the wrong agenda.
Oh, okay.
Because we received two.
I'm glad to.
It's number 5 on the agenda. I apologize to you.
That's okay. I thought because it was an informational request, perhaps you were going to move on to
gosh, no. Dan Hill, you're
business.
probably going to shoot me. Are you still? And I know Jesse's is here as well.
Yes. Thanks very much for hearing me now. My name is Elizabeth Pyle. I'm an attorney with Dan Hill at Hill Law. And we just wanted to bring some matters to the commission's attention this evening about the DEP proceeding for this matter. And we would like to request that the commission participate in the current DEP proceeding and ask DEP to affirm affirm your denial order of conditions, at least as to infiltration system number 1 and the emergency access driveway for this property. And Dan Hill sent a letter today to you explaining our position and including an analysis from our engineer, John Chesia, and I believe that you have that before you. But we just wanted to bring to your attention that on September 13th, the DEP analyst on this matter issued a letter to the applicant requesting modification of the proposed stormwater management design. However, this letter ignored the commission's position that more information was required from the applicant, at least as to infiltration system number 1, which discharges into the buffer zone and toward the wetland and stream. DEP's letter made a blanket statement that since most of the discharges are outside of the buffer zone, that the commission should not have requested more information for infiltration system number 1. But we think this is incorrect because it is clear that that infiltration system discharges to the buffer zone. So we were hoping that the commission could send DEP a letter stating that more information is required for at least this part of the stormwater management system concerning infiltration system number 1, and ask the DEP to uphold the commission's denial for insufficient information, at least on this basis. The second point that we wanted to raise and that we put forward in the letter that Dan Hill submitted today was that DEP's information request asked the developer to redesign the emergency access driveway so that it meets the 80% TSS standard. And last week, a new plan was submitted by the developer that includes porous pavement with a subgrade liner. We provided a letter today from our engineer, John Chesia, confirming that this design still does not meet the 80% TSS standard, still does not comply with the stormwater handbook, and will not function to meet that TSS standard. And the reasons that he listed in his letter that you have is that the proposed change would not make the driveway an infiltration system because there's an impermeable liner underneath the driveway, so it wouldn't infiltrate to obtain that 80% TSS removal. He also noted instances where the design doesn't comply with the stormwater handbook. It's too steep at 10% grade, whereas porous pavement should only be used at 5% grade or less. The base of the porous pavement system is supposed to be flat, but here it's on a slope. And also the whole thing would be located within 100 feet of the resource area and 10 feet of the property line, both of which are not allowed under the stormwater handbook. So we just wanted to bring this all to the commission's attention. And we're going to be submitting some information to DEP on this. And we would just wanted to request that the commission also provide comments to DEP on the inadequacy of this design and request that DEP affirm the denial. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. And otherwise, that's what I just wanted to tell you tonight.
Oh, thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I apologize again for skipping right over that.
It's okay.
That the number, it's on the new agenda, not the old agenda. And just for the public's benefit and the other commissioners, I am generally copied on the DEP correspondence, as is just Jesse Schumer and Dan Hill and Elizabeth Pyle. And we're in kind of an awkward position. We are a stakeholder, certainly, in the proceeding before DEP. Whether we're a party or not, I'm not even sure. But we have an interest in it. And I guess the question for us is the appeal of our denial of the permit has gone to DEP, and they will at some point issue a superseding order. And the superseding order can, reverse us, overrule us, amend us, consider our decision or not. And at that point, we would be in a position to file an appeal. As would the neighborhood group as well. So the question then becomes, well, if we take an appeal, we have to go to town council to do that. We have to have the approval of the select board to authorize the payment, to have them represent the board in taking the appeal. So the question is, do we have an appealable issue at this time? Because I think that the letter that I think was distributed to all commission members it did say that they rejected our denial because they felt that we did not state a reason why we needed the information, which I personally thought was strange since the language of the letter actually said why we needed it. But in any event, that was the same ruling that they gave in the 582 Blue Hill Avenue request for information as well. So it's the same DEP response that we hadn't stated why we needed the information. Again, that the issue has come up before for us. Do we wait for a superseding order and then make a decision with the advice of town council to appeal or not appeal, or do we weigh in before that? And weighing in before that is particularly appropriate. I think we've gone to, I personally have gone to those meetings. I think Arthur Doyle, you were at one of the meetings with the DEP at 582 Blue Hill Avenue. I went to the one at 648, 652 Canton Avenue and met with the DEP official. So I guess I don't know. I'm not exactly sure we have a role at this point, but if we do, it would be, as Elizabeth suggested, to just make a statement, make a comment about what our feelings are. But Jesse, I would invite you to tell me I'm wrong. I am a party, I'm not a party, or what?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing us to be heard tonight. For the record, my name is Attorney Jesse Schomer. I represent the applicant and the developer on this project, as you know. I won't say you're wrong about anything you said, Mr. Chair. I guess I would just like to correct a point with respect to the procedural posture of this matter. The letter that you refer to, Mr. Chair, issued by DEP constitutes a determination by the Northeast Regional Office, and I think it's a mischaracterization to say that it was just this DEP reviewer, Mr. Farrick. This is reviewed by the section chief, and the determination that's made in a project like this, where the order of conditions issued by the commission is to deny the project for lack of information. There's a two-step process that's made in this case, and DEP has already made the determination that the commission's denial for lack of information was not an appropriate finding, and has proceeded to review the project on the merits. So that's where we are at this point. DEP is reviewing the merits. The point of whether the denial for lack of information should be affirmed has passed for the moment, but I think you're correct, Mr. Chair, to say that that's an appealable issue that the commission could choose to appeal to the Office of Appeals and Dispute Resolution if you choose to, and Attorney Pyle and Attorney Hill's clients have the same right to do the same, having been participants in the underlying matter. So with that, I don't really have anything further to say, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's appropriate to comment on the substance of the letter that was filed today, because I agree with the point that you made that really there's not much for the commission to do at this point. It's just a matter of DEP issuing their superseding order, and we can all determine where we go from there.
Well, I haven't read what Dan Hill sent today. I haven't seen it. And to whom was it sent? Was it a DEP filing or?
No, it was sent to you, and it was sent to you and Attorney Schromer and I believe the commission. And just checking, did you not receive anything from us today?
I was in court this afternoon, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so
I probably did. If he said it,
if you haven't received anything from us, I'd be happy to send it again. I don't know if there was some problem with the email getting bounced back, but I didn't receive any notification. But I'm happy to provide anything to you. And please check to make sure that you have a letter from Dan Hill today, enclosing correspondence from John Chesia, and that really lays out the matter as I just explained to you here. And I agree now is with Mr. Schroeder that now is not the time to take an appeal, but we're just asking you to provide comment as they continue with their review. This would be the opportunity to provide comments to DEP should you choose to do so. And we're hoping that you would.
All right, no, I understand that, and you know, I'm very sensitive to the open meeting law in terms of discussing this. If we discuss it, it should be on the agenda, and which it is. And I'm not sure if there's a response or a consensus as to whether or not we should make a comment or not, and or do we simply defer to town council as to whether or not, I mean, DEP did take a position that said that we were not entitled to deny the permit because of lack of information. And they also said because we didn't explain the reason why we wanted it, which I take strong issue with, but be that as it may, I mean, I guess we could make a comment that in fact, the language that they quoted actually says in good old English language, the reason we need this is to see whether or not to test or evaluate the efficacy of the drainage system, and to see whether or not the mounding has an impact on the design features. So I'm kind of stumped at what we do. Because I want to make sure that it's done in a public setting and done appropriately under the open meeting law. But what I suggest is that maybe this is executive session because it involves litigation. I don't know. What I'd like to do is talk to to Town Council Peter Mello, and ask for his advice as to what we should do. And I guess if it relates to litigation, that would be executive session. I don't know, Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, Mr. Chair, and I hope it's understood and recognized by the commissioners that this matter is the subject of pending litigation by Hill Law, which relates to, among other claims, a claim against the town of Milton and the Zoning Board of Appeals that the approval of the project under the comprehensive permit statute constituted imminent damage to the environment. And the basis of that claim is essentially these same issues that Hill Law has been raising with respect to the groundwater mounding analysis. So I would encourage the commission to get the advice of your counsel. In addition to Mr. Mello, the town has also retained Hemingway and Barnes to represent the town with respect to that Superior Court litigation, and I'm happy to provide the commission with a copy of the complaint that has been filed by Hill Law that outlines their environmental damage claims.
Yeah, it would be great if you could do that. I'd be grateful.
Sure. Or we could too, whatever you prefer.
that would be helpful. And then the commissioners would know, have a better idea of what we're talking about. All right. Well, thank you. This was on the agenda for informational purposes, and it's accomplished just that. Exactly what it was intended to do, to get us up to speed as to where this project is before DEP, and we can consult with council to see if A, we have any options, and B, we should take advantage of those options. So thank you.
Very much.
Any questions or comments from commission members? Arthur, any thoughts?
I think we're on the right course.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Thank you. And I again, Elisa and Jesse, I apologize for using the wrong agenda. So thank you for your patience and your courtesy.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for hearing us.
All right, thank you. Anything else, additional business, folks? Hearing none, motion to adjourn? Somebody? Good, okay.
So moved.
Wendy made the motion to adjourn, and I'll second it. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good, God bless you. All right. Good night, all. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good
Good night, everybody. Take care.
See you Saturday.
Yes, indeed.
See you Saturday, 8:30.
Yes, indeed.